The room was full of smiles and clapping hands when my wife stood up and ruined my life. Balloons hung from the ceiling. A banner said "Happy Retirement, Dad asterisk." My coworkers raised their glasses. My children were standing behind her, smiling like this was a joke. Then my wife cleared her throat, handed me a folder and said, "I want a divorce." The music stopped. My heart stopped. And as I opened the folder and saw the papers, I wondered one terrible thing. How long had they all been waiting to do this to me? I had worked 42 years at the same company. I never missed a day unless I was sick. I showed up early. I stayed late. I paid for braces, school trips, birthdays, and college. That night was supposed to be a thank you. It was supposed to be my moment. Instead, it became my public ending. People laughed at first. They thought it was part of the party. Someone even clapped. My wife smiled a tight smile and tapped the papers with her finger. "I'm serious," she said. "Sign them now. Let's not drag this out." I looked at my children. My son stared at the floor. My daughter crossed her arms and nodded like this was the right thing. I felt smaller than I ever had before. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I took the pen. The room held its breath as I signed my name. Then I leaned close to my wife, so only she could hear me, and I whispered, "You have no idea what you just did." Her smile flickered, just for a second. 4 months later, everything would fall apart for them. But that night, all I had was silence. After I signed, my wife took the papers like a prize. She thanked the guests and told them dessert was being served. People avoided my eyes. Someone patted my shoulder and said, "You'll be okay." No one asked what I wanted. I left early. No goodbye speech. No farewell hug. I walked to my car alone, holding a small box with a cheap watch inside, a gift from my team. It rattled in my hands as I drove home. The house was dark when I arrived. My wife had already packed a bag. She was calm, almost cheerful. "You can sleep in the guest room," she said. "The lawyer will contact you tomorrow." I asked her one question: why? She shrugged. "I'm tired, and the kids agree it's time." That hurt more than the papers. I went to the guest room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall until the sun came up. That was the night everything made sense. Not all at once, not clearly, but enough. I had felt something was wrong for a long time. The late phone calls she took outside. The way my children stopped asking me for advice. The way money arguments always ended with me being told I was old-fashioned. I thought it was just stress. Retirement plans. Life changes. I was wrong. The next morning, my wife was gone. A note on the counter said she would stay with her sister. She asked me not to contact her unless it was through the lawyer. So I didn't. I made coffee. I sat at the table. I breathed. Then I did something I had not done in years. I opened my old filing cabinet. Inside were folders I had kept since the day I started working. Pension statements, investment records, property documents, notes written in my careful handwriting. I was not a flashy man, but I was careful. I believed in planning. My wife thought I was boring. I smiled for the first time since the party. For weeks after the divorce papers were signed, my children barely spoke to me. When they did, it was cold, short messages. No visits. My daughter told me, "Mom deserves happiness too." My son said, "Let's not make this harder." They didn't ask where I was living. They didn't ask if I was okay. I moved into a small apartment across town. It was quiet, clean, empty. I liked it. Every day I walked. I cooked simple meals. I slept well. And every day I learned more. I learned that my wife had been planning the divorce for over a year. I learned she had talked to the kids before she talked to me. I learned she told them I was controlling, that I hid money, that I would leave them with nothing if she didn't act first. That was the lie that turned them against me. I didn't correct it, not yet. I let them believe it. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the lawyer. It explained the division of assets. The house would be sold, accounts would be split, my pension would be divided. It all looked fair on paper. But paper doesn't tell the whole story. I called the lawyer and asked a simple question. Is everything listed here complete? He said, based on what your wife provided, yes. I thanked him and hung up. Then I made my first move. I scheduled an appointment with the company's retirement office. The woman there remembered me. She congratulated me. She asked how retirement felt. I said it feels like the truth. She laughed, not knowing what I meant. I asked for a full review of my benefits, all of them. Old plans, deferred options, survivor clauses, everything. Her smile faded as she scrolled. Oh, she said, this is interesting. I leaned forward. Tell me. She hesitated. Some of these assets are not subject to division. They were structured years ago. Years ago, before my wife ever started planning. Before my children ever chose sides. I thanked her and left with a folder thicker than the divorce papers. That night my phone rang. It was my daughter. Mom says you're being difficult, she said. Why won't you just cooperate? I looked at the folder on my table. I thought about the party, the smiles, the cheering. I am cooperating, I said calmly, just not the way you think. She hung up on me. 2 days later, my wife's sister called. Her voice was sharp. What are you doing? She demanded. Your wife is very upset. I said nothing. You're hiding something, she said. I smiled. 4 months, that's how long it would take. 4 months for the truth to surface. 4 months for the careful plans to crack. 4 months for my children to realize they had cheered at the wrong moment. As I hung up the phone, a new message arrived from the lawyer. The subject line read, urgent clarification needed. I opened it, and my smile disappeared. Because someone had just discovered the first piece of what my wife never knew existed. And if they kept digging, everything would change. The first mistake people make about quiet men is thinking we do not notice things. We notice everything. We just do not always speak. As I sat alone in my apartment that night, the lawyer's email glowing on my phone, I did not panic. I did not rush to reply. I had learned long ago that rushing only helps the person who is already ahead of you. Instead, I put the phone face down and let myself remember how I got here. My wife and I had been married for 36 years. When we first met, she laughed easily. She liked my calm nature. She said I made her feel safe. I believed that was enough. For a long time it was. When the children were small, we worked as a team. I handled the bills. She handled the home. We agreed on that together. I never hid money. I never yelled. I never scared her. I thought peace meant success. But slowly something shifted. She began to resent my silence. She said I was distant. I said I was tired. She wanted more trips, more gifts, more excitement. I wanted stability. We stopped arguing because we stopped talking honestly. That was my mistake. When my company offered an optional retirement savings plan 22 years ago, I signed up quietly. It was not something most employees noticed. It was tied to long-term service and special clauses. I told my wife about my pension, but not every detail. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I did not think it mattered. It was all for us anyway. At least, that is what I believed back then. As the years passed, my wife began to spend more time with new friends, women who talked about starting over and living your best life. She started using words like freedom and fairness. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing. But my children noticed the change before I did. My daughter became protective of her mother. My son started repeating things I had never heard before, like emotional neglect and financial imbalance. Words my wife had planted carefully. She told them I controlled the money, that I made her feel small, that she stayed for them, not for me. None of it was true, but truth does not matter much once a story is told enough times. I remembered the day my daughter stopped calling me for advice. She used to ask me everything: school, work, relationships. Then one day she said, "Mom thinks you wouldn't understand." That should have been my warning. The lawyer's email buzzed again. I picked up the phone and finally read it carefully. He wanted clarification about a retirement account that had appeared during the benefits review, one that was not listed in the divorce disclosures, one that my wife had not mentioned. I replied politely. I said I was reviewing documents and would respond soon. Then I did something else. I called an old coworker. His name was Daniel. We had started at the company the same year. He was already retired and living quietly with his wife. He answered on the second ring. "I need to ask you something," I said. "About the retirement plan," he asked. My chest tightened. "How did you know?" He sighed. "Your wife called me last month." That sentence changed everything. "She called you?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "She wanted to know how my divorce settlement worked." Divorce settlement, not retirement planning, not future security. Divorce. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking for the first time since the party. So she had been preparing longer than I thought, and she had been gathering information. But she had missed something important. Daniel had never opted into the same plan I had. That night I went through every document in the folder I received from the retirement office. Slowly, carefully. I read each line like it mattered because it did. Some benefits were protected by time, others by structure. Some required action, others required silence. I realized then that my wife had not just misjudged me. She had underestimated patience. The next morning, my son showed up at my apartment without warning. He stood awkwardly in the doorway like a visitor, not a child. "Mom says you're trying to take things from her," he said. I gestured for him to sit. He didn't. "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I'm protecting what I worked for." "That's the same thing," he replied sharply. I looked at him and saw fear behind his anger. Fear of losing comfort, fear of being wrong. "She told you I hid money," I said. He hesitated. "She said you didn't tell her everything." "I told her enough," I said calmly. "I never lied." He didn't answer. He left without saying goodbye. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The house went up for sale. My wife posted smiling pictures online, talking about new beginnings. My children liked every post. I stayed quiet. Behind the scenes, the lawyer's tone changed. His emails became shorter, more careful. He asked more questions. One afternoon, he called me directly. "There are some assets here that complicate things," he said. "Assets your wife believed would be split." And I asked. "And they may not be," he said slowly. I thanked him and ended the call. That evening my daughter called again. Her voice was softer this time. "Mom's really stressed," she said. "Can't you just make this easier?" I closed my eyes. "The truth will do that," I said. She went silent. "What truth?" "You'll see," I replied. After the call, I sat alone and felt the weight of my choices. I could have spoken earlier. I could have defended myself sooner. Maybe my children would have listened. Maybe not. But silence had already cost me everything once. I would not let it cost me twice. A month later, the lawyer requested a formal meeting. Both parties present. My wife agreed immediately. She thought this was the moment she would win. I arrived early and sat quietly at the table. My wife walked in confident, dressed sharply, her chin high. She barely looked at me. The lawyer cleared his throat. "There have been developments." My wife smiled. "Good, let's finish this." He opened a file and said, "Some accounts are not divisible under current law." Her smile froze. "What do you mean?" she asked. He explained carefully, slowly, using words she could not argue with. Her face changed color. "My children were not there. They had chosen not to attend. As the meeting ended, my wife stood up abruptly. "You planned this," she hissed. I looked at her calmly. "You planned first," I said. She stormed out. That night my phone rang nonstop. Calls, messages, voicemails. I did not answer, because this was only the beginning. What my wife still did not know was that the money was only part of it. And when the next truth came out, it would not just change the divorce. It would change how my children saw everything they had cheered for. When people feel safe, they tell the truth by accident. After the meeting with the lawyer, my wife stopped pretending to be calm. She called my children every day. She cried. She said I was punishing her. She said I was trying to embarrass her. And most importantly, she said I had planned to leave her with nothing. That word spread quickly. My son sent me a long message late one night. He said he felt betrayed. He said a real father would not do this to the mother of his children. He said I was being cruel. I read the message 3 times. Then I replied with one sentence. I never did anything in secret that I did not earn in public. He did not respond. A few days later, my daughter finally agreed to meet me for coffee. She chose a busy place, like she was afraid of being alone with me. When she arrived, she did not hug me. She sat across the table and folded her hands tightly. "Mom says you've been lying to us for years," she said. I nodded slowly. Then she should explain exactly how. "She says you hid money," my daughter said, "that you planned this divorce to hurt her." I took a deep breath. "Did she tell you about the plan she made before the retirement party?" My daughter frowned. "What plan?" I leaned forward. "Ask her when she first spoke to a divorce lawyer." She hesitated. She said it was recent. I shook my head. "She called my coworker a year ago." Her eyes widened just a little. "She also told the lawyer I was controlling," I continued. "Ask her how many times I stopped her from spending money." My daughter opened her mouth, then closed it. I did not push further. I knew something important. Doubt had entered the room. When we left, she hugged me quickly like she used to when she was younger. Not fully, but it mattered. That night I received another call from the lawyer. His voice was tense. "There's a problem," he said. "What kind?" I asked. "Your wife submitted a statement claiming you transferred funds to a third party before the divorce." I laughed once, short and sharp. "That's not true." "I know," he said, "but she included documents." That got my attention. He emailed them to me immediately. Bank statements, numbers, dates. They looked real. Too real. I checked my records, every account, every transaction. Then I saw it. The account was not mine. It was hers. She had moved money into a private account months before the divorce, then changed the name on the statement copy. She was not just lying. She was accusing me of her own actions. I sent the lawyer proof within the hour. The next day, the tone changed again. This time, the lawyer asked to speak to both parties' legal teams, urgently. I knew what that meant. Someone was in trouble. Before that meeting could happen, my son showed up at my apartment again. This time he looked tired, older. "Mom's panicking," he said quietly. "She says you're trying to ruin her." I looked at him carefully. "Did she tell you about the account?" He swallowed. "What account?" I stood up and opened my folder. I placed the copies on the table. He stared at them. That's her name," he said. "Yes," I replied, "and she tried to say it was mine." He sat down heavily. "She said you were manipulating things," he whispered. "I never had to," I said. "The truth does that on its own." For the first time, my son looked ashamed. But shame is not the same as understanding. That came later. At the next legal meeting, my wife arrived late. Her hair was messy. Her confidence was gone. She kept glancing at her phone like she was waiting for rescue. The lawyer spoke carefully, choosing each word. "There is evidence of misrepresentation," he said, "and possible intent to deceive." My wife shook her head. "He forced me," she said suddenly, pointing at me. "He controlled everything. I didn't understand what I was signing." I did not speak. The lawyer turned to me. "Do you deny the accusation?" "Yes," I said calmly, "and I can prove it." I handed over my records. Silence filled the room. My wife's lawyer leaned over and whispered something urgently to her. Her face drained of color. The meeting ended early. Outside, she followed me into the hallway. "You're destroying our family," she hissed. I looked at her steadily. "You already tried," I replied. That night my daughter called again. This time she was crying. "She lied to us," she said, "about so many things." I closed my eyes. "I know." "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" she asked. "Because you weren't ready to hear it," I said gently. There was a long pause. "Mom says you always plan to leave," she said quietly. "No," I answered. "I planned to retire, she planned to escape." The next weeks were heavy. Conversations happened without me. My children talked to each other. They talked to their mother. They tried to decide who to believe. I did not rush them, because there was still something they did not know. One evening, I received a call from someone I had not heard from in years, a former manager from my company. "I was asked to verify something," he said carefully. "What?" I asked. "Your wife claimed she was entitled to survivor benefits under a plan you enrolled in years ago." I smiled slightly. "She is not." "That's what I told them," he said, "but there's more." My stomach tightened. "Go on." "She submitted a request using outdated paperwork," he said, "and claimed you approved it." I closed my eyes. Forgery. She had crossed a line she could not come back from. I thanked him and hung up. That night I did not sleep, because this was no longer just a divorce. This was something else entirely. The next morning the lawyer called again. His voice was low and serious. "There may be legal consequences beyond family court now," he said. I looked out the window at the quiet street below. "Will my children find out?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "soon." I hung up and sat still. The cheering at the retirement party echoed in my head. They had thought it was over. They had no idea it had only just begun. And when the full truth came out, it would not just break trust. It would shatter the story they had all believed. Truth does not rush. It waits until people are tired of lying. After the lawyer warned me about possible legal consequences, the world around me grew quieter. Calls slowed. Messages stopped. My wife went silent for the first time since the divorce papers were signed. That silence told me more than shouting ever could. She was afraid. I spent those days walking in the mornings and sitting with my thoughts in the evenings. I replayed our marriage in my head, not with anger but with clarity. I saw moments I had ignored, times I had chosen peace instead of questions. I understood now that silence had protected her plans. And her plans were bigger than I had realized. The next meeting was scheduled for a Friday morning. Both lawyers, financial advisors, a representative from my former company. This was no longer a simple divorce discussion. It had turned into something formal, serious. My wife arrived early this time. She did not look at me. Her hands shook as she held her purse. The confidence she once wore like armor was gone. The company representative spoke first. "There are discrepancies in the documents submitted," he said. "Some requests were made without authorization." My wife spoke quickly. "I was confused. I thought I had permission." The representative shook his head. "The signatures do not match." The room felt heavy. Then the advisor added something that made my heart tighten. "There is also an issue with a loan application," he said. I looked up. What loan? My wife froze. A personal loan, the advisor continued, taken against future expected settlement funds. My wife turned toward me sharply. You knew about this, she said. You planned this to trap me. I stayed calm. I didn't even know it existed. The advisor nodded. The loan was taken after the retirement party, based on expected division of assets that may not apply. That was when it became clear. She had already spent money she did not yet have. She had planned her new life before the old one was finished. The meeting ended without resolution. Too many questions, too many problems. Outside the building, my wife finally spoke honestly. I needed a fresh start, she said quietly. I couldn't wait anymore. And the kids, I asked. She looked away. They would understand later. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Using your children's trust as a shield is a deep kind of betrayal. That evening, my daughter came to my apartment unannounced. She looked different, older, tired. Mom told us she already made plans, she said. Trips, a new apartment, a business idea. I nodded, with money she did not have. My daughter sat down slowly. She said, you promised to support her. I shook my head. I promised to support our family, not a lie. She covered her face with her hands. I feel stupid, she whispered. You feel hurt, I corrected gently. That matters more. For the first time, she asked the question I had been waiting for. Dad, did you ever plan to leave us? No, I said without hesitation. I plan to stay quiet forever. She started crying. The next day my son called. His voice was tight. Mom asked me to help her, he said, with paperwork. What kind? I asked. She wanted me to sign something, he admitted. Something about benefits. My blood ran cold. Did you? No, he said quickly. I said I needed time. I let out a slow breath. You did the right thing. There was a long pause. She said you're dangerous, he said. I smiled sadly. People say that when control slips away. Weeks passed. The legal process slowed as investigations began. Requests were denied. Accounts were frozen. Questions multiplied. And then, one afternoon, the lawyer called me with news that changed everything. They found inconsistencies going back years, he said, not just recent actions. What kind of inconsistencies? I asked. Small ones, he replied. Withdrawals, transfers, nothing dramatic on their own. But together, I asked. They form a pattern. A pattern of quiet spending, quiet borrowing, quiet lies. The same way I had lived quietly. Only one of us had done it with honesty. That night my children came together to meet me. The three of us sat at the same table for the first time in months. No anger, no shouting. Just truth. We believed her because she spoke first, my son said, and because you didn't defend yourself. I know, I replied. I'm not angry. My daughter looked up at me. Are you okay? I thought about the retirement party, the cheering, the whisper. I will be, I said. As they were leaving, my daughter turned back. Mom doesn't know we met you, she said. I nodded. She doesn't need to, not yet. After they left, I received a message from an unknown number. It was my wife. They're turning against me. Fix this. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. If you don't help me, everything will come out. I closed my eyes. Because she still did not understand the truth. Everything was already coming out. And the next revelation would not just end the divorce. It would decide who paid the real price for the lies. I set the phone down, knowing one thing for certain. The next chapter would be the one she feared most. When fear replaces confidence, people start making mistakes. My wife began making many of them. After her messages asking me to fix this, I did not reply. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something important. I had spent years protecting her peace. Now she wanted me to protect her lies. I would not do that again. 2 days later, my lawyer called and asked me to come in immediately. "They want to speak with you," he said, "not as part of the divorce, separately." I knew what that meant. When I arrived, 2 additional people were already there. One from the Financial Review Board, one from my former company's compliance department. They were calm, polite, and very serious. "We are reviewing actions taken under your name," the compliance officer said. "Some of them were not authorized by you." I nodded. I assumed as much. They exchanged a look. "You're not surprised," the financial reviewer said. "No," I replied. "I've been married a long time." That was when they told me something that changed the shape of the entire story. The loan my wife had taken was not the only one. There were 2 others. Smaller amounts, taken at different times, always just before big family expenses, always explained away as temporary, always hidden under shared paperwork she handled. "She used joint authority forms," the reviewer said, "but the signatures don't match your verified samples." Forgery again. Only this time, it wasn't about future plans. It was about the past. My wife had been borrowing quietly for years, and she had been blaming me. I left the meeting feeling numb, not angry, just tired. A tiredness that comes when you finally understand how deeply someone has betrayed you. That evening, my son came over again. He did not knock. He used his old key. "Mom's in trouble," he said immediately. "I know," I replied. "She says everything was for the family," he continued, "that she was just trying to keep things together." I looked at him carefully. "Did she ever tell you she took loans?" He shook his head. "No." "Did she tell you she signed my name?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "No." I nodded. "Then she wasn't keeping things together. She was keeping you unaware." That was the moment something broke inside him. "She always said you were the reason she felt trapped," he said quietly. "But now I don't know what to believe." "Believe what can be proven," I said, "not what feels comforting." The next week was chaos. The divorce proceedings were paused. The financial review expanded. My wife's accounts were frozen. Her lawyer stopped returning calls. My children began receiving messages from extended family, confused questions, rumors, half-truths. My wife tried to control the story, but it was slipping away from her. She showed up at my apartment one night without warning. She looked nothing like the woman who had handed me divorce papers at my retirement party. Her hair was unkempt. Her eyes were red. Her confidence was gone. "You did this," she said the moment I opened the door. "No," I replied calmly. "I stopped covering for it." She stepped inside without asking. "If you had just spoken earlier, none of this would be happening." I laughed softly. "If I had spoken earlier, you would have lied earlier." She stared at me. "They're asking questions," she said. "People are looking at things they shouldn't." "They're looking at the truth," I said. She sat down heavily on the couch. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. That sentence told me everything. She had never planned to be caught. She had planned to walk away clean, supported by money she assumed was guaranteed. I sat across from her. "Did you ever think about what would happen to the kids?" She looked away. "They would be fine." "No," I said, "they would believe you and hate me." Her silence was answer enough. A few days later, the investigators contacted my children directly, not to accuse them, to inform them. They were shown documents, dates, signatures, transfers, things they could not argue with. That night, both of them came to my apartment together. My daughter was shaking. "She lied," she said, "about everything." "She didn't just lie," my son added. "She used us." I did not say "I told you so." I did not need to. We cheered, my daughter whispered, at the party. I reached across the table and took her hand. You believed the story you were given. But you warned her, my son said. You whispered something. I nodded. I warned myself too. Over the next weeks, the full picture came together. The loans, the forged signatures, the false claims, the attempt to secure benefits that did not belong to her. It became clear that if I had not stayed calm, if I had argued publicly, if I had reacted with anger, I might have destroyed my own credibility. My silence had protected me. But now it was time to speak. The final meeting was scheduled with all parties present: lawyers, advisors, representatives. Even my children were invited at my request. My wife sat alone on one side of the table. She did not look at anyone. The lead investigator spoke clearly. There is sufficient evidence of financial misrepresentation, he said. Some matters may proceed beyond civil court. My wife began to cry. My daughter stood up. Why didn't you just tell us the truth? She asked her mother. My wife looked at her, eyes desperate. Because then you might have stayed with him. That was the moment my children understood everything. The divorce was finalized quietly after that, not with celebration, not with cheering. With consequences. My wife left with far less than she had expected, and far more accountability than she had planned for. As for me, I walked away with something more valuable than money. Clarity. Months later, my son asked me something I will never forget. How did you stay so calm when everyone turned on you? I thought for a long moment. Because panic helps liars, I said. Patience exposes them. That is the lesson I learned too late, but not too late to matter. When the story ended, my family was smaller. But it was honest. And that was enough. When the truth comes out, it does not bring peace right away. First it brings shock, then silence, then consequences. After the final meeting where the investigators spoke, my wife did not call me again. Not once. The messages stopped. The threats stopped. The begging stopped. That told me something important. She had finally realized she could not control the story anymore. But the damage she caused was still moving, like a stone thrown into water. The waves were spreading. My children stayed close to me in those weeks, not because they suddenly trusted me fully, but because they were trying to understand how they had been fooled. That kind of pain takes time. My daughter asked questions every day, the same ones again and again. When did it start? How long was she lying? Did you really not know? I answered every question the same way every time, slowly, clearly, without anger, because I knew something now. If I lost my calm, they would lose their footing again. She started borrowing quietly, I explained one evening. Little amounts, then bigger ones. She believed no one would notice as long as the family looked happy. My son stared at the floor. She always said money problems were your fault. I know, I said. It was easier than admitting the truth. That night after they left, I sat alone and felt the weight of everything I had carried without knowing. The pressure, the tension in our marriage, the way arguments never made sense. Now they did. But clarity does not erase pain. The next development came from an unexpected place. My former company contacted me again. Not through the compliance department this time, but through an executive I had not spoken to since my retirement party. He asked if I could come in for a private conversation. When I arrived, he closed the door behind us and sighed. There's something you should know, he said. What? I asked. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were emails, requests, forms, all submitted by my wife, dated months before the divorce. She tried to position herself as your legal representative, he said. She claimed you were unwell, that you wanted her to handle future benefits. I felt my stomach drop. She said I was unwell, I asked. Yes, he replied. She implied cognitive decline. That word echoed in my head. Cognitive decline. She had not just tried to take money. She had tried to erase me. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the folder. Why wasn't this approved? Because your work record contradicted everything, he said, and because we contacted you directly. I nodded slowly. That night I did not sleep. I kept thinking about the retirement party, the cheering, the smiles, the way my children stood behind her while she handed me those papers. She had already painted me as weak, confused, finished. That was part of the plan. The next morning, my lawyer called. There may be grounds to reopen certain aspects of the divorce, he said carefully. Not to punish, but to protect your name. My name, I asked. Yes, he replied. Some statements she made could affect your reputation if left unchallenged. I thought about it for a long time. For most of my life, I avoided conflict. I believed keeping the peace was more important than being right. But peace built on lies is not peace. It is silence wearing a mask. Do it, I said finally. That decision changed the tone of everything. Not publicly, quietly, professionally. A formal notice was sent, a request for correction, a record of false claims. My wife was forced to respond, and that response revealed something new. She admitted she believed I would not fight back. She believed I would stay quiet, embarrassed, tired, and eager to disappear. That belief had guided all her choices. My daughter read the response herself. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. She thought you were weak, she said. No, I replied gently. She thought silence meant weakness. My son clenched his jaw. She told everyone you were losing your edge. I nodded. That was her excuse. The next blow came faster than expected. My wife's sister called my daughter in a panic. She said investigators had asked questions about shared expenses, about family trips, about money moved through her accounts. My wife had not acted alone. She had help, not in planning the divorce, but in hiding the damage. My children told me everything. She asked Aunt Linda to hold money for her, my daughter said. She said it was temporary. That explained gaps in the records. The circle widened. A few days later, my lawyer called again, his voice tense. They're expanding the review, he said. Other people may be questioned. Will this hurt the kids? I asked immediately. No, he assured me. They are not implicated, but they will hear things. That night my children stayed late at my apartment. We did not talk much. We sat together. Quiet, like we used to when they were small. Finally, my son spoke. She always told us you didn't fight because you didn't care, he said. Now I know you didn't fight because you trusted her. Yes, I replied. And she used that, my daughter whispered. Yes, I said again. The hardest part was still coming. Because truth does not only punish the guilty, it also shatters memories. Family photos, holidays, laughter, all of it was now stained with questions. Was it real? Was it funded by lies? One evening, my wife finally called me. Her voice was small. They're asking about things I don't remember clearly, she said. You remember, I replied calmly. You just didn't expect to explain them. She started crying. I never wanted to hurt the kids, she said. But you did, I replied. You put them between a lie and the man who loved them. She was silent. Then she said something that chilled me. If this goes any further, she whispered, they'll take everything. I closed my eyes. Because I knew something she didn't yet know. They had already found more. And the next discovery would not just change the divorce. It would decide whether this stayed a family tragedy or became something much bigger. When people realize they are losing control, they try to change the rules. My wife did exactly that. After her last call where she whispered that everything might be taken from her, I expected silence again. Instead, I received a message from her lawyer the next morning. The tone was different, softer, almost polite. They wanted to talk about a settlement adjustment. That phrase alone told me enough. She was no longer fighting to win. She was trying to limit damage. I met my lawyer first. He read the message and shook his head. "This means they're scared," he said. "Something new has surfaced." "What?" I asked. "They haven't said yet," he replied. "But when people ask for adjustments suddenly, it's because the ground beneath them is moving." He was right. Later that day, the call came from the investigators. They had found additional transfers, not large enough to alarm banks on their own, but consistent, regular, carefully spaced, always just under reporting limits. She knew exactly what she was doing, the investigator said. This wasn't panic, this was planning. I closed my eyes as he spoke. Every small argument, every strange expense, every moment she told me not to worry, it all lined up now. Then he said something that made my hands go cold. "One of the accounts leads overseas." "Overseas," I repeated. "Yes," he said, "opened with assistance." That word again. Assistance. The web was wider than I thought. That evening my children came over quietly. They had already been contacted again. More questions, more documents. They asked us about trips, my daughter said, about why Mom insisted we go certain places. I nodded slowly. She needed excuses. My son looked sick. She used our vacations to move money. "Yes," I said gently, "without you knowing." He slammed his fist lightly on the table. How could she do that to us? I did not answer. Some questions do not have comforting answers. The next day, my wife's sister was formally questioned. She called my daughter afterward, crying. She said she did not know the full story, that she was only helping family. That excuse did not change the facts. The pressure was closing in. And then came the moment I never expected. My wife showed up again, but this time she was not angry, she was desperate. She stood in my doorway, eyes hollow, voice shaking. "They think I planned everything," she said. "They think I meant to hurt you." I looked at her calmly. "Did you?" She hesitated. "I thought you would survive," she whispered. That was her truth. She believed I would endure anything quietly, that I would absorb the damage so she could walk free. "I never wanted it to go this far," she said again. "But it did," I replied. She stepped closer. "If you speak for me, they'll listen. You always had that calm voice, that respect." I felt something inside me finally settle. She was not asking for forgiveness. She was asking me to lie. "No," I said simply. Her face twisted. "If you don't help me, the kids will suffer." "They're already suffering," I replied, "because of you." She broke down then, crying openly, shaking. "I was afraid of growing old with nothing," she said. "I was afraid of being invisible." I believed her. Fear makes people do terrible things. But fear does not erase responsibility. She left without another word. That night, my son asked me something quietly. "Dad, if you had fought back at the party, would any of this have happened?" I thought about it. "If I had shouted," I said, "the story would be about my anger, not her actions." He nodded slowly. 2 days later, the investigators requested one final meeting before making their recommendations. My lawyer warned me. "This could change everything," he said. "How?" I asked. "They found something they weren't looking for," he replied, "and it ties directly to the retirement party." That sentence made my heart stop. "The party?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "something signed, something witnessed." I thought back to that night, the folder, the pen, the cheering, the smiles. I had only signed divorce papers. Or so I believed. What exactly did they find? I asked. There was a pause on the line. Then my lawyer spoke carefully. They believe one additional document was placed in that folder. My breath caught. A document that could explain why she chose that moment, he continued, and why she was so confident you wouldn't notice. I sat down slowly. Because if that was true, then the betrayal did not start at the retirement party. It ended there. And whatever that document was, it could change how everything began. The memory of that night came back sharper than ever. The banner, the clapping, the way my wife held the folder like it was nothing more than party notes, the way my children stood behind her, smiling, trusting. At the time, I believed I signed only divorce papers, nothing more. Now, doubt settled into my chest like a weight. I met my lawyer the next morning. He placed a copy of a document on the table between us. This, he said quietly, was filed the same night as the divorce papers. I stared at it. It was a consent form, one I recognized immediately, a document that allowed limited authority over certain retirement-related actions during a transition period. The signature at the bottom was mine. Or at least it looked like mine. My hands went cold. I never signed this, I said. We know, my lawyer replied, but it was witnessed by two people. I didn't need to ask who. My wife had planned the setting perfectly. A public event, alcohol, emotion, celebration. No one expects betrayal during applause. She slipped it in, I whispered. Yes, my lawyer said, right between the divorce papers. I closed my eyes. That was why she chose the retirement party, not for drama, not for revenge. For cover. The investigators confirmed it later that day. The document gave her temporary access, just enough to move funds and apply for changes before full reviews kicked in. It explained how she acted so confidently afterward, why she took loans, why she promised a future she had not yet secured. She believed that paper made it legal. It did not. Because the authority expired the moment questions were raised, and because intent mattered. Fraud matters. My children were brought in that evening. They sat quietly as the investigator explained everything in clear, simple terms. She used the party, he said, and your presence to make it look ordinary. My daughter's hands shook. We were there, she whispered. We watched. My son's face was pale. She used us as witnesses. No one corrected him. After the meeting, my children did not speak for a long time. Then my daughter finally looked at me. You tried to warn her, she said. That whisper. Yes, I replied. What did you know then? My son asked. That she thought I wasn't paying attention, I said, and that she was wrong. That night my wife called again. Her voice was frantic now. They found it, didn't they? She asked. Yes, I said. You signed it, she insisted. You touched the pen, you agreed. I trusted you, I replied. That's not the same thing. She started crying. I thought it would be over before anyone noticed. You thought wrong, I said. The next day, the investigators made their position clear. The case would move forward, not quietly, not gently. My wife's lawyer withdrew. That alone spoke volumes. My children stayed with me that weekend. We cooked together. We talked late into the night. They asked questions about my work, my plans, my fears, things they had not asked in years. I feel like I don't know her anymore, my daughter said softly. You do, I replied. You're just seeing her clearly. On Monday morning, my lawyer called with one final update. They've set a date, he said, formal proceedings. When? I asked. Soon, he replied, and there's something else. What? I asked. They believe there may be one more document, he said, one that was never filed. My heart tightened. What kind of document? One that could explain how long this plan truly existed, he said. And who else knew? I looked at the quiet room around me, my children asleep on the couch, the calm I had fought to protect. Will they find it? I asked. Yes, he said. And when they do, it won't just change how this ends. I swallowed. It will change how it began. The line went dead. And for the first time since the retirement party, I felt something close to fear. Because if there was one more secret still hidden, then the worst betrayal might not yet be revealed. The waiting was worse than the discovery. Once the investigators mentioned the possibility of another document, everything slowed down. No new calls, no new meetings, just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air before a storm. I tried to stay calm, but for the first time since this all began, I felt unsettled. Not because I feared the truth, but because I feared what it would do to my children when it finally surfaced. Whatever that document was, it had been hidden carefully. Too carefully. 3 days later, the call came. My lawyer asked me to come in immediately. His voice was serious but controlled. That told me enough. This was not a rumor. They had found something. When I arrived, the room was already full. My lawyer, an investigator, a representative from the company, and a man I did not recognize. This is Mr. Hayes, the investigator said, a notary. The word made my chest tighten. The notary cleared his throat. I was asked to verify a signature from several years ago, he said. I recognized it. Recognized what? I asked. He slid a document across the table. I stared at it for a long moment before understanding what I was seeing. It was a long-term authorization agreement. Not recent. Dated 8 years ago. And signed with my name. I didn't sign this, I said quietly. The notary nodded. That's why I came forward. I notarized a similar document for you years ago. This one uses the same format, but the signature is copied, traced. My stomach dropped. 8 years. This was not a sudden plan. This was a long game. The investigator spoke next. This document gave your wife broad authority over certain financial movements. It was never filed properly, which is why it stayed hidden. Who requested it? I asked. The notary hesitated. Your wife did. She said you were traveling and had given verbal permission. I felt a cold calm settle over me. So she's been preparing for 8 years, I said. Yes, the investigator replied, at least. That explained everything. The quiet resentment, the strange spending, the way she slowly rewrote the story of our marriage, the way she positioned me as controlling, distant, and declining. She had been building a future that did not include me. And she had been using my silence as cover. The investigator continued. This document also names a secondary contact. My heart pounded. Who? He looked at me carefully. Someone close to the family. My mind raced. A friend, a relative. No, he said, one of your children. The room went completely still. What? I whispered. My lawyer raised his head sharply. Which one? The investigator did not answer right away. Instead, he slid another page forward. It was an acknowledgement form, signed 6 years ago. My daughter's name was on it. I felt the world tilt. That doesn't mean she knew what it was, the investigator said quickly. She was listed as an emergency contact, likely told it was routine. But that did not matter. Because my wife had crossed the final line. She had pulled our child into it. Not to commit fraud, but to legitimize it. I sat back, my hands numb. She used her, I said quietly. Yes, the investigator replied, and that changes everything. That evening, I told my children the truth. All of it. My daughter broke down immediately. I was 18, she cried. She said it was paperwork for school records, for insurance. I held her as she shook. You did nothing wrong, I said. She lied to you. My son looked sick. She planned this before we were even adults, he whispered. Yes, I replied. Before the party, before the divorce, before everything. That night my daughter barely slept. She kept asking the same question. Was she ever really happy? I did not know how to answer that. The next morning, my lawyer called again. They're escalating it, he said, because of the involvement of your daughter. What does that mean? I asked. It means this is no longer just about money, he replied. It's about abuse of trust. I closed my eyes. And her, I asked. There was a pause. Your wife will be formally charged with intent to deceive, he said, and possibly more. I hung up and sat alone. The woman I married had not just betrayed me. She had shaped our entire family around a lie. Later that day, my wife sent one final message. I never meant to hurt her. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I deleted the message without replying. Because intent no longer mattered. Only consequences did. That night, as I sat with my children in the quiet apartment, I realized something painful and true. The divorce was over. The investigation was nearly complete. But the hardest moment was still ahead. Because soon, my wife would have to face our children and explain why she had been planning to leave their father for 8 years, while teaching them to cheer when it finally happened. The final meeting did not feel like an ending. There was no shouting, no dramatic speeches, no celebration, just quiet truth spoken clearly with nowhere left to hide. My wife sat across the table from our children for the first time since everything came out. Her hands were folded tightly. Her eyes were tired. She looked smaller than I remembered, not because she had changed physically, but because the story she built around herself was gone. The investigator explained everything again, slowly, in plain words. The long planning, the hidden documents, the forged signatures, the loans, the attempt to use a retirement transition form, the 8-year-old authorization, the way our daughter's name had been added without her understanding what it meant. No one interrupted. When he finished, the room was silent. My daughter spoke first. Why, she asked softly, why didn't you just tell us the truth? My wife opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears ran down her face, but for once, no excuse came out quickly. I was scared, she said finally. I didn't want to start over with nothing. I didn't want to be invisible. My son leaned forward. So you made Dad invisible instead? That question broke something in her. She cried openly then, not quietly, not politely. She cried like someone who had reached the end of every lie and found nothing left to stand on. I thought he would survive, she said, looking at me. He always did. I nodded slowly. I survived because I trusted you. That was the truth of it. The investigator explained the outcome next. Some matters would continue beyond family court. Others were already resolved. The divorce itself was final. The financial damage was being corrected as much as possible. The false claims were formally withdrawn. My name was cleared. There was no cheering this time. Only consequences. When the meeting ended, my wife stood up slowly. She looked at our children, then at me. I'm sorry, she said. It was the first time she had said those words without asking for something in return. My daughter wiped her eyes. I need time, she said. My son nodded. We all do. My wife left quietly. That was the last time I saw her in person. In the weeks that followed, life settled into something new. Not perfect, not painless, but honest. My children stayed close, sometimes too close, sometimes distant. Healing does not move in straight lines. We talked often. We repeated things. We corrected misunderstandings. We rebuilt trust slowly, brick by brick. One evening, my daughter asked me something I will always remember. "Why didn't you stop her sooner?" she asked. "You're smart, you had records." I thought about it carefully. "Because I believed love meant trust," I said, "and I believed silence meant peace." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know silence can protect lies," I replied, "and peace without truth isn't peace at all." My son asked his question a few days later. "When she handed you those papers at the party, why didn't you fight?" I smiled sadly, because fighting would have given her what she wanted, a story where I looked angry, confused, or guilty. "And instead," he asked. "Instead, I let the truth catch up on its own." Months later, my retirement finally felt real. Not because of freedom or money or plans, but because I no longer carried a lie that wasn't mine. I moved into a small house near a park. I walked every morning. I cooked simple meals. I read books I had put off for years. I lived quietly but not silently. My children visited often. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we cried. Sometimes we just sat together and said nothing, but it was honest silence now. One afternoon, my daughter said something that surprised me. "We shouldn't have cheered," she said. I looked at her. "You didn't know." "But you warned her," she said. "You whispered something." I nodded. "I warned myself too." "What did you mean?" she asked. "I meant that truth doesn't need noise," I said. "It only needs time." That is the lesson this story leaves behind. If you are quiet, people may mistake you for weak. If you are patient, people may think you are unaware. But calm does not mean blind. Silence does not mean empty. And when lies are built on the belief that you will never speak, the truth does not need revenge. It only needs to be seen. At my retirement party, my wife thought the story was over. It was not. It was just beginning. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with clarity. And in the end, clarity was enough.